Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. We haven't had a voting session since June 28th. It is now September. Now we're having a voting session that in essence is a non-session. There is nothing substantial on this agenda today. The issue is this. There are plenty of important issues facing the state. I am calling the bluff of the Democrats. If you read Paul Molshine's article this morning, he said that Steve Sweeney is talking about some really good ideas, but none of them are bills, none of them are being posted, none of them are being voted on. So consequently, when people act like they're happy with a democratically controlled legislature, I'd have a question. They're not here. They have a non-session session, and in essence, they're freezing the ball. Because I do remember a former legislator who used to say, whatever you do, don't do anything. Because every time you do something, somebody doesn't like it. Pipiandi, actually.
Really?
Well, he said that in theory, whatever you do, don't do anything, because if you do something, someone doesn't like it. So the Democrats are frozen in place, and as we know in basketball, you freeze the ball. So the governor comes up with a proposal. He's out there. He argues the proposal. I understand that you tear it down, whatever the governor says, you tear it down. But it's a proposal. He's willing to have the legislature vote on it. What are the Democrats voting on today? Nothing. I ask all of you, while people are exiting this state, to call upon the Democrats to at least have an open discussion on property tax relief. The Asbury Park Press has started this discussion. They said, what is your plan? We have a number of different plans, A, B, C, D, E, and F. Pick one. But have a discussion on the floor of the legislature. You've got 80 members down here today. There's an opportunity to have a discussion on where are you on school funding changes. Do you have any possibility, is there any possibility of reform? Let people tell the public what their position is. You can't simply have a session to have a session after 3 or 4 months and discuss none of the serious issues affecting the state. Once again, this isn't personal. I like Vinnie Prieto, but I don't blame him. Why do anything and get somebody mad at you? And that, I think, the Democrats are in a position of simply inertia, and I think the gravity of doing nothing is pulling them down into a position of basically inaction.
And as Leader Bramnick said, I mean, today we are all down here for a non-session session. There are tremendously important things that we've been discussing for the past several years. And we've reached a point where we should get a fourth button, yes, no, abstain, and almost WTH, because we're essentially voting on things like, see, the bull weeble. I think what Leader Bramnick said is very important. I represent an area that is part of Bergen County, as well as Passaic County. Bergen and Passaic counties have disproportionately been impacted for decades by the unfair school funding formula. Now, if somebody doesn't like the flat $6,599 per pupil, fine. Let's at least have those discussions. Bergen is the most populous county in the state. 69 of the 70 municipalities in Bergen County would see increases in excess of, in most cases, 500% to over 1,800% in additional funding. You have places like Dumont, places like Fairlawn, Bergenfield, places that are more blue-collar, not wealthy by anybody's standard, that 2 family members working full-time, working 2 jobs, and barely hanging on to their homes because they are now paying $12,000 a year in property taxes, 70% of that comprised by their schools. And so I think everybody here, everybody on both sides of the aisle want to ensure that every child in the state gets a proper education. but not by merely throwing tens of thousands of dollars away every year. I want somebody to explain to me why a child in Fairlawn, who very well may be the first child in their family going through high school, going to college, why they should only receive $1,000 or less per year as a student, and a child in Asbury Park is worth over $30,000 a year from our state. It makes no sense to me. And so we need to have the open discussion about this. You know, we keep hearing about additional committees, additional studies. Nothing's happened. We are here today. All of us have other jobs. All of us have other lives. We are committed to what we do. So while we're down here, let's at least have open dialogue on this stuff.
Today reminds me of Seinfeld. This is a show about nothing. Although we're not here as a comedy. We're here to get work done for the state. I appreciate our leader pulling this together, because here's what we face. We face the number one issue in the state: property taxes. Everybody complains about property taxes. Perfect time to have an open dialogue. Let's be transparent in the process. Let's show the people of the state that we're committed to fixing this problem. So the school funding formula certainly is one great way of reducing property taxes. In the district that I represent, in District 40, here's the difference: $197 million more for our district. Hugely powerful figure to present to the public, to tell them that we could actually bring back $197 million from our income taxes back to our district, to improve the education of every single town in our district, reduce the property taxes for every single taxpayer in our district. But forget about the parochial interests of representing District 40. Let's go to District 27. District 27, which is represented by folks from the other side of the aisle. I don't have the grand total. I can tell you that every single town gains significantly in the revised school funding formula, to the point where the lowest is $1 million and it climbs significantly from there. Let's take Livingston Township. Livingston Township would gain $37 million more. What do you say to your taxpayers in District 27, if you represent that district, that I'm not going to support a revision in the school funding formula that would provide you with property tax relief and better education for the students in the district I represent? You have to answer to folks. And I think that the great way to do that is to have open dialogue today on the floor of the Assembly to talk about how we're going to make significant changes in school funding that will provide property tax relief.
You know, it can be very frustrating being a minority member of the legislature, because you know what the issues are. You know what we have to do to address the highest property taxes in the nation. We all recognize that the school funding formula is by far the biggest issue that'll have an impact on people's wallets. But yet, every time we're down here, we move not forward, we move backward. And I'm not saying we have to take the governor's plan. We're not saying that we have to go with Senator Sweeney's plan. But we have to have a plan. It can't just be, let's study it some more. Because studying it has what got us in this position. We know how to fix this stuff. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. And it's not only the big picture items, like school funding formula. It's not only the big picture items. Gannett did a whole series on a number of existing pieces of legislation that, if they were enacted, would have a direct impact on property taxes. One of those bills that they reference is my bill, Assembly Bill 1216, which deals with civil service reform. Man, oh man, that's not complicated at all. I mean, I could give it to a high school student, and they could figure out just what types of benefits municipalities and school boards would receive from some reforms to the archaic civil service system, allowing furloughs, allowing public organizations to opt out. Just those simple pieces of legislation that have already been laid out for everyone, if enacted, would have a major impact. But instead, like the leader said, every time we're down here, I feel like I'm in a basketball game with seconds on the clock, and the Democrats have the ball, and they're just looking to run it out. Because every time they're pressed, they have a bunch of answers, they have a bunch of positions, but there's never any follow-through. They never take the ball to the hoop. And until that happens, we will be stuck drowning in the most expensive state in the country to live. And that's what's hurting our budget. It's driving people out. And until it's corrected, we will never, ever see a better New Jersey where people want to live here and stay here, both young and old alike. Thank you.
I want to thank you for coming. I do want to echo a lot of what my colleagues said, and I won't belabor the point, I think, but the word that hasn't been used today is urgency. There needs to be a sense of urgency on the part of the majority to solve the number one problem in the state, which is the crushing burden of property taxes on New Jersey's property taxpayers. The message coming out of today needs to be to the Democrats, waiting till January 2018 is not a property tax relief plan. And that is what they are doing. They're trying to run the clock out on the Christie administration and delay on giving us relief. We know what the number one issue in the state is. It's property tax relief. We have plans that will solve and address the problem. Put them in committee, let's debate them, then put them on the floor, let's vote on them. Instead of putting that on the floor, instead of putting that in committee, today we have on our board lists the all-important sip, shuck, and slurp weekend resolution, which I'm going to call on the majority right now to make a commitment not to post any resolutions with onomatopoeias in the title until they post property tax relief on the floor.
Overall, just as a comment on the debate that we need to have about the school funding formula, I feel strongly that New Jersey could be a laboratory for reform instead of being a showplace for inefficiency. That's what we've got today. And missing in the acrimonious back and forth about winners and losers from a funding perspective is any serious discussion about the ones who are really the winners and the losers, and those are the children. The children who aren't getting the kinds of educational support they need because this state hasn't done enough to encourage charter schools and school choice and disciplined, rigorous studies of the kinds of curriculum that produce children who can read and write at the highest levels and the kinds of curriculum that don't. That's where our money ought to go. That's what I would support wholeheartedly. That's what I know every single one of my colleagues would support. And I would like to just perhaps leave it with a question for our colleagues. If they support that too, well, where are they? And if they don't support it, why?